Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Giovannini. Francois, good morning. How are you, dear?
Good morning. I'm doing fantastic on this wonderful snowy morning in Pittsburgh. How are you?
That's insane. I'm actually doing very well for being as weather-driven of a person as I am. It has been so rainy and dark and gross here the last couple of days.
Yeah.
But I'm doing great. Otherwise, we have a new team member in the cave. Her name is Shirley.
Nice.
You'll meet her when you get back.
Yeah, next week after
Yeah.
an awesome trip that we're about to take to, we might as well plug it, to the Prosper Show that we were, I think for the past like 6 to 8 months, I know you've pushed for it and it was sort
Indeed.
of up in the air. And the fact that we have this amazing opportunity to talk about such an important topic and we covered this on Monday too, but I definitely want to round it out again. It's based around alternatives to Amazon FBA fulfillment, which everyone knows as just FBA. And, us as consumers, we know it as just the Prime service.
Yeah.
But what a lot of companies don't, or businesses might not know, and consumers might not know, is that the Prime badge doesn't always mean that it's coming from an Amazon Prime warehouse. It's just someone that can actually fulfill it within the 2-day or 1-day guarantee that Amazon has.
Right.
So very excited to actually dive into that and see, what everyone's thoughts are. We have an amazing panel too.
Oh my gosh,
CEO
we
of
do.
Deliver. Yeah, CEO of Deliver. But people that have been doing this for a very long time and have dedicated a lot of their time to just fulfillment and 3PL and modernizing and digitizing that space. So I'm excited.
I am too. Yeah. Like you said, I've been pushing for us to go to Prosper since I've caught wind of it. And I'm so excited that we get to go and that we can also offer a discount for anybody who hasn't bought their ticket yet. I know that it's super, super short notice, but anybody watching this live or even on replay in the next couple of days, if you want to go to Prosper and you haven't yet, or if you're on the fence, send me a DM or send Francois a DM, or just went through the show on any of our socials. We'll get back to you with a discount code so that you can attend this incredible show. It's at the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, March 14th through 16th of 2022. Replayers on Apple Podcasts. Sorry, it's long gone. But yeah, it's gonna be an absolutely amazing show. And for anybody who wants to meet Ryan Cramer in person,
he'll be there.
Will be in Vegas. Good morning, Ryan. Very excited to see you here.
Yeah, and excited to meet him. I feel like we've made a new friend in the industry for over a year and talked to him back and forth continuously. He helped us with a lot of the podcasting.
Oh, tremendously.
And we finally get to meet him in person. So I'm excited. I'm very excited.
He's going to be like the celebrity of the show. And also, I just found out via TikTok last night, Kelsey Farrar is coming as well with Lunch with Norm.
Nice.
So he was like, his TikTok was like, oh, I don't get to hide behind the screen anymore. I actually have to meet these people in person. I was like, you, sir, are going to need to book hours with everybody because they're just going to, you're the celebrity. You are the brains behind the show. You're not going to be able to get in line. Ryan, when are you getting in town? Maybe we can see you on Sunday or something. But
yeah,
anyway,
we'll plan it out.
We'll book our time with him. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into it then. Today we have with us Robert Giovannini with IronPlane. I keep wanting to say Iron Age. It's a very famous a Korean barbecue place down here. I don't know if they're national. Is that a national chain? Iron Age?
I don't know.
It's IronPlane. Your business is IronPlane, not Iron Age.
Yeah, that's right. Hello. Thanks for having me over here, guys.
We are very excited to have you. Thank you so much. And you're calling in from Maine, and it's also cold and wet and gross there?
It's cold and wet and gross, but, we make a choice to live here, so can't complain.
See, and I choose to live in Atlanta for the sunshine, and this is nonsense.
That's right. So I have nothing to complain about, right? I mean, because I chose this, and, and I'm going into mud season, and that's all good. So,
Mud season. That's hilarious.
It's our 5th season. So
That is so funny. Well, Robert, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you let everybody know a little bit about your business and about yourself and your background? How did you get to be on this podcast today? Just in general, what do you do on the day to day?
So Lisa, Francois, it's funny. It all started with a chess set in Russia, believe it or not. And this is going back to 1995, 96. I mean, Amazon had just come on the scene, I think with a year before that, right? E-commerce is still very new. And we were wrapping up, my wife and I were wrapping up a Peace Corps service in Russia at the time. And we found this guy who was making these incredible chess sets. And I mean, gorgeous, hand sculpted, everything. And so we got Front Page, which was the tool of the time that you could actually build an e-commerce platform. It's a big word for what it was. It wasn't coding HTML, which was really nice. And so, we put up this thing, buychess.com, put up this chess set, put a $10,000 price tag on it. And oh my gosh, a week later, some ski slope in Canada bought it, sight unseen. And we saw this money hit our bank account. And I mean, this is before SSL. I mean, God, we probably shouldn't have ever done it, right? And so it really unknowingly began our journey in e-commerce. And after all these years, we kind of got to this point where we started getting asked to build sites. And about 8-10 years ago, it just became our passion. And we love working with companies to help them get the sort of the same joy, energy, excitement that we got out of building our first e-commerce site and selling products online. And that just sort of was our genesis. And here we are today. And we build and help maintain and grow e-commerce websites for companies around the US and Canada.
That's amazing.
Man, you've probably seen, seeing this industry blossom to what it is today is probably fascinating, from selling a single chess set to what you're doing now.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, if you look over the years, my wife Barbara and I were talking about this the other day, and it's just like, when you think about all the platforms we've been on, the things we've tried, the money we've thrown down the drain, I mean, I don't know how much money I've spent on SEO and on paid search and on, you name it. Right. And, but, each step of the way, you incrementally figure out what works and you put together that puzzle, and you try the new things that are always coming down the line. And once you kind of get that engine going, and that's the big part of it, right, is getting that engine. And if you can get that engine, people use the term flywheel, whatever you want to use, whatever analogy you're working on, right? If you can get that thing going, now you can start to reap the benefits of it and really scale and have fun with it. So, yeah.
And out of curiosity, how do you keep up, or your agency, everyone that you work with, how do they keep up with all the newest and latest tools that are out there? And I mean, all the way from Magento to BigCommerce there's just so much to keep up with. Are there any single sources that are able to release some of this information?
No. I don't think
so.
I mean, I like to say yes. I like to say, sure, let's go over here to G2 or Clutch or go to a conference and look at the top 50. I mean, obviously, Gartner's got its Magic Quadrant, and you see the major players showing up there as you would expect most years, and a few new entrants that look good and promising. And I love that. I mean, it's validating some of the tried and true, but it's introducing you to some of the new. And so I think that's always a great place to start. But when it comes to platforms, I mean, this is, gosh, when people call us, right? I mean, it's either we get two major camps. We get the emergency room scenario where, at least from their perspective, everything's wrong and needs to be fixed yesterday, and I'm losing money and help, and this could be anything from a startup to $100 million a year company, right? But it's just a nightmare. Or there's Paradise Island. They've got this vision of everything that could be perfect, and I'm going to have 360-degree view of my customer and all my channels, and it's all going to connect and be perfect. And obviously, it's never, it's always somewhere in the middle. Part of what we do is look at their platforms, right? We look and say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish here? What are your business objectives? And that's one of the unique aspects of IronPlane, in that I came up from the business side. I came up from the e-com side of selling stuff. And so all of my decisions, and good and bad and middle, over the years have been about, is this driving my business goals? And trying to stay true to that. Because if it is, everything else should fall in place. And so this is one of our big differences. So, I mean, we've got phenomenal developers on our team. I mean, a lot of people that are smarter than I am on the technology side, but we sit down and when we look at platforms and what we're choosing to go into, and to answer your question a little more specifically, we want to pick platforms that, at least from our perspective, have some staying power, right? You don't want to be on the latest and greatest unless you you have experience there. It's a little bit like going into cryptocurrency. Sure, play, but do you want to put all your money in there? Probably not, right? But there's interest and there's possibilities, and there's going to be something that does click there long term. But if I'm running a company that's growing, I'm probably not going to go into something that's brand new, that doesn't have worldwide adoption, or at least significant regional adoption, because I'm going to need support. I'm going to need developers. I'm going to need marketing integration. I'm going to need all things. I'm going to need ERP integrations, whatever it is, right? And that only comes with tools that have been around a little bit. You also want them to have taken the time to, kick their own tires, right? I mean, things break. I mean, even in our world of Magento, which, tried and true, we love it. We're all in on Magento, have been for a long time, for a lot of reasons, which we can get into. But even 2 weeks ago, they had 2 emergency vulnerabilities they had to patch, right? And it's Sunday night, and we're scrambling. The entire dev teams are scrambling to get these emergency patches in the next 8 hours, right? Because it was a pretty significant exploit. And so, and this is Adobe, with all of its resources, still having to deal with those kinds of issues. So I think a smaller platform, now, less people are going to try to exploit a smaller platform. And obviously, you want to go where you have the most bang for your buck, I guess, in this case. But the reality is, you don't know what you don't know in those platforms. And so I think that, if my goal as a business is to run my business and not focus on the technology, then I want to be on something where the technology, if it's being done right, can fall to the back. And I can just focus on running the business. And that's a big part of how we try to approach these things. When I'm talking to folks, whether they end up going with us or not, I'm always trying to encourage, hey, you don't want the technology to be driving your day. And so often it is. I mean, it's a black box for most people. Most people, even, unless you are an e-com developer, the technology is a black box. And you just want it to work. And you find yourself, wrestling with it, something is wrong. It's either not the right platform for your business. It's either too big, too small, you're a square peg, round hole, all those pieces, or it just wasn't built right. And that's where we want people to get on a proper foundation. And so I think there's a lot of great platforms out there. I think it starts to come down to issues of, for example, business. Once you've identified which ones can solve the features you need, and that's another whole area, right? Now you got to look at some of the business logic. SaaS versus PaaS versus on-prem. There's a lot of pros and cons to all of these things, and so these are some of the questions that we try to help people figure out.
That's amazing. You just hit like 6 different directions. We can tell that's great. There's so many different places that we can take this conversation today. But I love that you kind of hit, without directly saying it, like what you guys do and what we do at Noviland, and what we've always kind of talked about is like, we want to help you work on your business, not in your business. Great. Like you shouldn't be inside of it every single day as the CEO or as the, the business owner, trying to just like make these tiny little tweaks, make everything work. You should kind of have these systems in place to help it work. So I don't know, where do we want to start this? Do we want to start with picking a platform, working with an agency, site security? Well, what do we want to start with?
Yeah, I think let's try to get into the business owner's mindset. Like when you first have these conversations with the business owners, I know you're mentioning, you guys try to get into the business objectives. I'm guessing more long-term, but I guess what do they need to have prepared when they are approaching an agency? Do they need to have current metrics and just say, hey, I want to increase my conversion rate? Or do they need to know about the features that they might want to include in the future? I guess, where does this conversation start?
I think you've hit on two of the most important parts there. We want the ideal person that's come to us has already done their own internal audits, okay, of what they need out of a platform, whether they're starting new or they're trying to fix something they've got. And I encourage a real simple matrix. Across the top, I want to see, hey, who are all my direct users that are going to interact with this website? Customers, sales reps, whoever is really in on a daily basis on the site. Who are my indirect users? Maybe it's connecting to a third-party call center software package. Who are my executives? Not people that have a stake in it, the business objectives, and have a bigger picture of how it fits in with the overall organization. I want them, and then I want my strategic folks. Maybe it's my marketing agency, anybody else that is not directly interacting but has a strategic analysis. Down the list, down this left side here, I'm basically going to say, okay, I'm going to brainstorm every single feature I can think of, issue, functionality. You can pick up feature lists. That's not hard to do. But then just think about in your own organization within each of these groups, what are they looking for? I want somebody who's the project lead to do that, and then go sit down with those people, because it's so often that we get into this scenario where we're talking to one side of the organization. It could be marketing, it could be IT, depends on who's running the project, okay? and they're seeing it from their lens. We're seeing it from our lens, and that's going to be tech and our, overall business objectives. But you've got to have all those other pieces come in, because if you don't, inevitably, we're going to be 3 months, 6 months down a development cycle, and somebody else is going to go, hey, but what about this? And this is not doing what I expected. Or everybody just assumed it was all going to happen, and then they get to, you hate to say it, but you almost get to launch, and then there's like this big chunk over here that was missing, right? And so getting that alignment internally is so vitally important. And then it should be completely dovetailed with what are the business objectives. Okay. And these don't have to be rocket science. It could be as simple as, I want an e-commerce site that actually can convert people and get them to buy online. It could be, I'm looking for increased traffic. It could be, I'm looking for increased AOVs. I'm looking to bring people back more often. Or it could be lead generation. I mean, that's a little bit out of our world, but it's, this is where, but as we cross into B2B, honestly, that actually, they want the e-commerce platform and a lot of the functionality, but they're not necessarily grabbing onto the transactional part of it yet, even though we're step-by-step coaching our B2B clients and our manufacturers to go that direction and leverage those tools, but they want some of the platform aspects. So there is a lead gen part there that can, even in our world, be, come in. So those two things, if you can get somebody aligned there, or with us on a discovery process, get that alignment, it makes everything proceed so much easier, because you're talking the same language at that point. And I just, it keeps everybody's expectations aligned, and that's half the battle when you're working with an agency, I think.
And that is sort of the importance of keeping an agile team and making sure that you could perform cross-functionally. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, marketing is always going to want the fanciest things that they might be able to use, they might not be able to use.
We like pretty dashboards. It feeds the type A. We see all the things.
I get in so much trouble when I say that. Like, no, that's just the paint on the walls. We don't need to, but no, you're absolutely right. I know.
With this though, is this something where they need to have, for example, in their audit, they have their current user journey, and then they plot out an alternative user journey where they want to get to? Yeah. Maybe some strategies of doubling their conversion rate, or to bring back repeat customers with, let's say, SMS or whatever functionality they might need there. Is this something they can just bring to you and you would be able to help them bring it to life? Or is this something where they have to have, like, for example, mock-ups created of, like, this is how we plan to actually execute on it on the site?
Our favorite is when they come to us with a blank slate, and we can bring in all of our expertise. Because, I mean, this is an area that we specifically focus in. Not every agency does, but we have UX and, specialists on staff. We have ADA compliance on staff. I mean, there's this whole level of, making sure your sites are ADA compliant, and it's so easy to get out of that. So, we like it when we can be directly involved in that level early on. That said, a lot of our companies have their own designers, their favorite designers, their brand standards that they're working with another agency for a long time. And so we'll work closely with them and basically say, hey, look, you could pursue this kind of design, but we want to tell you, if you could just tweak it this way, you're probably going to save this many development dollars, and it's going to be a lot easier to make it work. So we hope for a back and forth. And because if you go strictly down brand, you could find yourself, I mean, we used to have this. We had one client, we loved them dearly, but it would be literally the shade of green on a button. They would debate for weeks and then wonder why, development was, the front end development at least was slowing up. It's like, it's going through these committees where, from a business perspective, A, it wasn't going to likely make a significant difference. B, they hadn't yet run it through the compliance team for ADA compliance, and half the colors weren't going to work. So there's all these pieces that kind of go in there that if you're in silos, it gets real difficult to balance. And then there's all this backtracking. So what we try to do is integrate ourselves across those functions, as you said, and try to bring those key stakeholders in when it's appropriate and as early as possible, so that you don't lose that. And this goes even for the smallest company. I mean, even if you're a 2-person company, it's easy. I think what happens there is it's easy to lose yourself in the newest and latest and greatest. And you're like, I got to have this, and this, and this, and this, and I can put this module, and they lose sight of the goal. And so in those kinds of companies, we're really trying to sit down and say, hey, look, your goal here, we think, and correct us if we're wrong, is to get, your widget to sell more. And I mean, everything else is, particularly in those early days, unless you're all about your brand and your story, and that's what you're really going after. But that's a different website in many ways in my mind, right? And so, but if the goal here is moving product, then let's stay there. Let's stay focused on that and get you launched. Now you can layer on, right? And as opposed to the waterfall, right? The kind of an old school terminology, but where we're going to try to pack every single thing in, and it's going to be a year before we launch it, or 2 or 3 we've had, and then, seriously, I mean, over the years, we had one project that just dragged on for 3 years, and by the time it was right, and I remember we were about 19 months in, and we saw the right one and said, guys, if we don't put a line in the sand and get this thing launched, we're going to scrap. You got a 3-year life on almost most technology as it is. We are halfway through the life of this technology, and we haven't even launched it yet, and you're already behind 3 and so this is where we're trying to, you don't necessarily have to be agile in the, every day and, that fast release. In fact, that can be a little chaotic, I think, for business planning and goals and all those good things, but you got to have a cadence and you got to allow yourself to fit into that cadence. So.
Yeah. And that getting distracted by like the tools and software stuff, I always call that the shiny new toy syndrome. Because like if you give a toddler, everything else be damned. It is all about this toy. That's all we care about now. But a question, kind of like a left field question that I have, it's on the track of the ADA, because I remember talking about this in our introduction call and I found it very interesting. What percentage of e-commerce sites would you say are out there that are actually truly ADA compliant?
Very few.
Okay.
Very, very few. I don't have an exact number. I mean, last time I looked was 2 years ago. It's sort of metrics like that. I'm not sure anybody has an exact tracking, but I will tell you this: you don't just do it and you're done. I think you gotta think about it more as an ongoing process, and you're making the ongoing effort, because you're never going to be 100%. There's always going to be something that a reader can't read properly, or there's not a spacing that's not quite right, or you updated a color on this, or you didn't put a text on an image over here, right? There's always something that can knock you out of true 100% compliance. And I think what most people are looking for when they're saying they want a site to be compliant is that there's an ongoing process, a little bit like security. You have an ongoing process to ensure you're staying secure and safe and protecting your site. ADA compliance, you want to build it into your thinking and your overall process so that you don't find yourself at the end of a lawsuit because you have nothing on there and you've done nothing and it's not compliant in any way. So
can you elaborate on ADA compliance a little bit? I'm a little I don't know much about this concept.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, well, let me, and to be honest with you, a few years ago we never would have even given it that much of a thought, particularly for websites. But it's, in Europe in particular, WCAG is the standards in Europe. ADA is sort of our standards here. There's no official law, for example, but it's guidelines about how a website should be able to be readable or accessible, right? And for the vast majority of people. So if you're visually impaired or hearing impaired, the site ought to be able to leverage the technologies and tools out there to make it easier or feasible for you to interact with that site. So, and bare minimum, we think about readers. There's hardware readers that'll read through a site, and how a site is structured code-wise and how it's tagged and all these other pieces will tell the hardware reader how to go down it so that you could actually get through ordering a product online. If you start to think about that can get complex. I got to find the product, I got to sort it, filter, and get through these things. So what happens is, and I hate to say it because I think it takes a good concept and makes it feel negative in a lot of business owners' mouths or minds, is that there's ambulance chasing going on. There are folks that will go find low-hanging fruit and say, oh, you're not compliant. Oh, we see you're getting more notoriety and publicity, and you're a company that's of X size, so we're gonna threaten a lawsuit because your site's not compliant. And this is how we ended up getting in it, because our clients tend to stay with us very long term, and so we end up very much in strategic relations with them. And we got approached a couple of years ago. I think it's probably three or four at this point, the pandemic period really shrunk my,
Yeah.
my sense
Yeah.
of what times are these days.
It was a time suck.
Time does
Yeah, it
actually
really
exist.
was. I just, I'm like, was that a year ago? No, I was still sitting in this room.
Mhm.
So, and so it was, and they came and said, look, we've been served these papers. And it just happened that we had one of our UX person peeps she was just going all in on learning about this. And so we took her all the way, got, certifications and conferences, and it became a part of how we build out our sites. At least we consult on it and we let people know, you're making a business decision not to be compliant here. Realize what that could mean. It's your own risk. It's your own this, but we want you to be aware. But when we have one of our turnkey themes, it's mostly for doing highly custom front ends on sites, but we make it out of the box. It's ADA compliant. Now, the day somebody goes in and changes it and they don't follow the guidelines, it's no longer truly compliant. You know what I mean? And so, so it's an ongoing process, of course. So.
But
Got
it's interesting to me that less folks are ensuring that their websites are ADA compliant and maybe unknowingly are making their social media platforms ADA compliant. Because if you've noticed a lot on TikTok and on Instagram Reels, while it does have spoken word, almost everything is in text. And that kind of began from needing to be able to watch and consume the content in the same way with sound off as sound on.
Mhm.
And I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, the need to be able to watch TikTok on the quiet train or to be ADA compliant. But it kind of supports that compliance as well. So I find that fascinating because obviously like your physical location has to be ADA compliant. Like you have to have the parking and you have to have the wheelchair accessibility ramps and things like that. It's like, why don't people take it as seriously on their websites? And if you look at like your phone and like Netflix and the Roku, and anyway, I find it fascinating. That's just me. Sorry.
I think you're right. I think, and I think platforms are driving some of that because the platform can, TikTok can make it easy, right? I mean, YouTube can make it easy to do those things. Whereas if you've got your own platform that you can do anything on, even if it's a SaaS, you don't,
kind of forget about it.
Yeah, it's not top of mind.
You're right. When it's taken care of for you everywhere else already, you don't think. It's a really good point. I didn't consider that. It's a really good point.
And what size are they typically when they start to think about, for example, ADA compliance? I mean, in the past 5 years, we've seen some companies grow from nothing to tens of millions of hundreds of millions of dollars. And as they grow, let's say they might grow on the Amazon platform and they're taking their brand offline now, considering, hey, now we have this entire product line. We're working with other partners. We're expanding. We need to build on something ourselves. I guess the better question is, at what point should businesses start to think about building their own e-commerce platform versus using something like Shopify?
Oh, that's a great question. I had this debate internally last week. I'm going to tell my personal opinion, and then I think there's a different answer depending on the business. I personally, I don't like renting. Okay. So, I mean, if it's my business, because think about it. If you have a restaurant, right, you're just first starting out and then you're renting this great place in this great location. And then all of a sudden you get written up. You got, your James Beards Awards and your site, your restaurant's just cranking and you're the most popular thing. And you got this 3-year lease and 2 years in, there's lines out your door. What is the landlord going to do in year 3 when your lease comes up for renewal, right? You're stuck. You have built on somebody else's land. Okay. At the end of the day, not to mix my metaphors too much, but the reality is, if your location is so prime for you and you only rent that place, your overhead could double. I mean, your rent can double the next day and you're stuck. Okay. So this is where I get nervous about SaaS platforms. I love SaaS for a lot of reasons. I think Shopify, and we prefer BigCommerce, but that's just a technology reason for a few different things on the kinds of clients we work with. But, both as SaaS platforms are solid and you can grow a great e-commerce business there and you can get in relatively inexpensive. But as you grow and you've got complex integrations and you've done this really complex, front end that's also ADA compliant and it's PWA and it's all these things. You got $100,000 in your, you don't know it, but you look back 2 years and you spent $100,000 on your front end and you've got, complex product configuration, all these things. And all of a sudden, the SaaS fees are going up or the SaaS has run into financial issues and they can no longer invest quite in the security they used to invest in, or there's any number of structural things. And if that's your whole business, you are beholden. You've placed a lot of your livelihood in something you don't have direct control over. Now, if you've got a fairly simple product line, even if it's a lot of SKUs and your integrations are fairly straightforward, and and migration is not that hard, right? There's always gonna be some downtime and some expense, but you could do it. Well, then that's less of a risk. And I tell people all the time, look, if you don't foresee a really difficult migration should the need ever arise, then great. Start with, and if this platform does what you need, start there. But if you foresee a lot of growth or a lot of complexity or a lot of customization and high growth with those things, I want people to really seriously consider more of an on-prem where they at least have more access to the code base as a whole. And that's getting harder and harder these days because all the platforms, even Magento, is going much more SaaS oriented than on-prem. We still have our community solution, but I think that's going to be spun off over the next year or two. And the great news is that there's such a worldwide adoption of that. I think it's going to do just fine. But if you need the enterprise features, I think we're going to see very much more consolidated as a SaaS. Right now they call it a PaaS, platform as a service, which is sort of a hybrid between the two, which almost causes more issues than it helps because you're kind of navigating, the worst of both worlds in some respect. You know what I mean? It can be, again, depends on the client, depends on their needs, depends on all the inventory of features, right? But at the end of the day, the hybrid one is almost the worst of both. But so that's, hopefully it helps answer that or, give you some thoughts.
No, it does. It sheds some light
on-prem really quick. Sorry, what is on-prem?
On-prem would just be, it's a little bit of a misnomer, but it'd be the idea that you have the entire code base on your servers. It could be in the cloud, but you're not in Shopify's servers, which is where you are when you're already on Shopify or BigCommerce or Commerce Cloud, which is Magento's enterprise cloud solution. It's in their servers. So so SaaS versus on-prem essentially is where it breaks down of what you have control over and what you're controlling, right?
Okay.
And so in SaaS, you don't have to worry about server. The easiest thing is thinking about, you don't have to worry about servers and infrastructure and theory, security, and all that good stuff. But you also have less access to the core code and the ability to do what you might want to do with that. So,
got it. Okay. Sorry, I cut you off, Francois. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, is there sort of this oh crap moment for those that are on, let's say, Shopify or BigCommerce, and they say, well, I actually do want to migrate because I do have many things that I want to start to include that they just don't offer. Maybe they don't have the right partners or API integrations. I guess, is there a certain size? Is there a certain type of e-commerce company that you see are facing some of these challenges?
Yeah, and it's not even about size as much as complexity of their product line. So, for example, we work with furniture companies a lot, and product configuration on furniture can be very complex. It's not usually a single SKU. It's usually a lot of interdependent options. If I pick green, it only comes with this fabric in this size and this kind of foam, right? There's all these interdependency of options. Now the SaaS platforms keep rolling out additional features to allow for that, but this is not one of those that's easy to do with a module ever because it's so integrated with how the core code and the database is built up that if it doesn't have it built into the core, it's very hard to do this. Whereas a tool like Magento is so extensible, so customizable, or another tool like Shopware, which is not as popular, but it's very solid code base for an e-commerce on-prem solution. We can make that product do anything we want it to do. So if you go to our gatcreek.com, it's a great example. We have 3D virtualization on almost all their products, which was done by 3Kit, but it's fully integrated with the inventory and product database of the core platform. So when you go to that product detail page, you're not loading a third party anything. You are there. It's a good experience. I can choose all these options, and there's 79 colors and 5 different finishes. You can't shoot that many photographs. You can't build up a furniture for every single product. Thousands of SKUs, you'd have 1 million of them, right? So the 3D virtualization does all of that, gives it a really solid feel. And then the price build up on top of it, if you've got cost plus from an ERP system, this is another great example, really hard to do that in your standard Shopify's or BigCommerce. Now, again, the features are, more and more, and this is where we start to see some hybrids, but those are the kinds of complexities that can be very difficult. Another example of subscriptions. Do you run a subscription business? This can get hairy quickly. You know, you got 10 subscriptions a month, no problem. You got 1,000 subscriptions a day, you know, and people starting and stopping, and you got to have an enterprise solution like a Recurly out there, or some of the others that are great that we like. You know, you want to be, you got to be thinking about those pieces, because those are where it gets the old crap moment that you said.
Yeah, that's and that piece of understanding the technologies that are out there to solve your problems. I think that is the part where an agency can really help a ton. It's, for example, the furniture, not knowing if they could shoot the 3D. Do I have to shoot every variation of this? Well, shit, I have to work with my manufacturer for all the different types of samples. And that's a huge investment that they no longer have to do, because they're able to integrate a technology like the what you call it, the virtualization.
Yeah. That's right.
So is that something where an agency would be able to help a business with even exploring what potential solutions are out there for their product and their product line and their product line growth?
Yes, I think a good agency will do that, and a really good agency will know when they should back out if they're not the right solution. So like in our case, we're not a jack of all trades. We have chosen a few core platforms that we're very good at, and we hire, train, and, you know, do all that good stuff with. And if we get through a discovery with somebody, if we don't feel like we're a good fit, we're going to tell them. We don't, you know, and honestly, an agency can always find somebody to do the work.
Right.
But, you know, it's just not, it doesn't jive with our sort of long-term, we want to be with you long-term kind of idea. So you want an agency that, you know, you can really see that they have focused on some core technologies that in theory could work for you. And then, you know, and if it comes out of it that it's not the right fit, you know, you can part ways, and you can take what you've learned and go find the right one. And I think that's really, and this is where a good IT consultant can come in as well, or e-com consultant. I mean, there's folks out there that help people evaluate just platforms. I was talking to Jay Snyder over at B2B Squared yesterday, and he does it more from the B2B side of things, and just helping manufacturers figure out of all the platforms out there, what fits with what they need. And he's got his mind in their particular industry. And so I like what he's doing there because, you know, Magento's not always the right solution for somebody. I think it is a lot of cases, but not always.
And who would typically head up a project like this for finding an agency, even? Because I feel like that specific person has to know the right questions to ask to qualify the agency, to spot red flags. Because like you said, most agencies could probably find someone to finish or do the project, maybe not do it to, you know, their highest standards in their core competencies, but they could find someone to actually complete the project. Might be in a longer timeline. It could be poor quality, but I guess what position in a company heads up that project, and what are some qualifying questions to ask agencies even?
No, great. You know, honestly, that should be a new blog article. I'm sure there's a blog article on this. But we should write that damn blog article today. Okay, so if I was, you know, sitting on that side of the equation, I want somebody that has a good cultural fit. Okay, so you can have an agency. You can find an agency that has the credentials. Let's say Magento. They've got the Magento Masters, and they've got the certifications. They got all this stuff, and they've got their portfolios. You know, so that's the initial checkbox. Okay, but now you got to dig in and see. Okay, how they operate. Is that a good fit for our company? So, and I'll give you an example. We've had instances where we've worked with great companies, but they love the Friday night fire drill. I mean, just the CEO will call down and say, I want to change this on my live site, and Friday at midnight. We're not a good fit for that company, because we won't do a deployment on a Friday night, and we're certainly not going to do it on a live site, right? And so we want companies that fit with how we think the technology should flow and be built and supported for our values, and how we think you can get the most out of the relationship. So I would say that person in that organization wants to get obviously check the box. Do they cover the core technologies we think are the right things that we need? Do they have the proof? You know, do they have the testimonials? Do they have the portfolio? Do they have, you know, all those check the box kinds of things? But then you got to start meeting with them and see, okay, how do you work on a daily basis? And what happens when things go wrong? Because it's technology. I mean, even today, right? We couldn't even get our cameras working earlier, right? So, I mean, this is going to happen. And so, and that's half of my life is spent with either CEOs or owners or the CTOs or the whoever's the lead, telling them, stay calm here. We're gonna see you through. That's why you chose us, But stuff is going to happen. I tell every day one. Let's expect that it's going to happen. We're going to do our best to set those expectations. Now, so I think that person, that organization, that's where they need to get good at doing, right? Asking those questions. And if they're going to look at references, ask what happens when it went bad, because it always goes bad. I mean, there's always something that goes wrong. Okay. So how did the agency respond? Were they calm and collected? And did they come up with solutions, and were they responsive? Or do they hide, and because you see everything, you see all the extremes, right? But from our perspective as well, we want a client that embodies those values also, because we want to work as a partner. And we've had unfortunate circumstances where it's usually when personnel has changed. I'm sure we've all experienced this, right? And somebody comes in, it's like, why did you pick that vendor? It's like, okay. We have been here for 6 years with this company. We are arguably the only institutional knowledge that the company has. This has happened a couple of times. It's like, so let's work together. We're not going to throw you under the bus. We're going to, but that you see that happen. And we want to nip that kind of thing in the bud really, really, really fast, because it deteriorates the relationship. And so, I would tell anybody that's hiring people that are taking over those kinds of positions to encourage them to, yes, go in and vet. You have a new pair of eyes on this, but let's keep the relationship as positive as possible. So,
and
I love that.
I was just gonna say it relates to like kind of the introduction call that we had with the panelists for Prosper the other day, of whenever you're kind of vetting those agencies, asking the situational questions, or like the job interview style questions of, tell me about a time when, how did you handle this, instead of just, you do good work. Cool.
Well, I was going to get almost at the relationship side that you're emphasizing so much, and how important that is versus the cost base in a very transactional method, where I feel because, coming from our perspective, there are a lot of sourcing agencies, and a lot of times a manufacturer or brand owner might go to them and say, hey, tell me your price. And it's all, hey, I need this cheaper. I need that, additional feature, but I need it for this, only this amount is what I'm willing to pay. And it turns into being very transactional. And there isn't enough of that relationship building. It's, hey, we're both having a bad day right now. Can we take a step back and figure this out maybe tomorrow? Or it's interesting that you take it from that perspective. Do you think a lot of agencies pursue that, or I guess that method of being relationship first?
I think a lot of agencies like to land the new builds, the big builds, and are not as concerned about the long-term support, the maintenance, and that kind of relationship, because I think that's harder, to tell you the truth. And we've always been focused on that. I mean, we love the big builds, but at the end of the day, I'd rather have a small build and somebody that really just has this vision, and we can be a part of that process for many, many, many years. Okay. Because I think we're good at helping them realize that vision, at least from our lens. And so I think a lot of agencies, particularly if they have a sales first, traditional sales model, commission-based sales, where the goal is to land the contract. We learned this lesson. We had an opportunity, I think it's been about a year now. And I had one of my senior sales guys said, I'm going to go to, another agency and non-competing. And I said, okay, I get that. Pride hurt, but I dealt with it, and so, but I used this as an opportunity. We looked inward, and I said, I've never been a fan of the sales model where, we get a lead come in, inbound lead, paid search, outbound, whatever the effort is, right? And then there's a salesperson that gets a nice base salary, but also commission, because their incentive is to get it landed. And that's great. And they're going to talk. Well, I'm a little salesy as well. I mean, we get excited. We see the possibility. So, we paint a vision. So the customer gets real excited and sees, and they're seeing that vision that we're seeing that's 10 years down the road, but they think that's going to be in the next 3 months, right? Then also we land it and it goes over to the operations. The project director gets in and goes, who the heck promised this in 3 months? Okay. So,
Yes.
so we all, and so and now the good news is we tend to do code reviews or discoveries is the first thing we do, which gets back to one of our earlier questions, which is I do recommend doing those sort of first get to know you relationship kicker kinds of projects that are real, that the client can walk away with something concrete no matter what. And whether they stay with this agency or go to the next one, they've gotten a detailed discovery, they've gotten a code review, they've gotten an audit of some sort, right? That's almost a roadmap they can take with them. So I think that those are fantastic to sort of get to know each other and see if there's a good fit. But I digress. Going back to what I was saying, I want, on the sales side, we turned it upside down. And I sat down and we got rid of this whole idea of sales and marketing. We have our engagement department now. And if a lead comes in is interested, it's as soon as we know that they're a good fit, at least theoretically, they have intent to purchase, they have technologies within our wheelhouse, and we think we can be a good partner to them, we bring our operations people in immediately because they have a lens on what the person on the other side is talking about. And as I said before, when we talk about the stakeholders in the client side, all the stakeholders on this side actually also need to be brought in almost as early because, we might be talking to a marketing department and they're not thinking about all these other tech issues that are going to come up with the integrations, or we're talking to the tech side and they're not thinking about marketing's issues over here, right? And ideally we have both on the call, and then we've got our operations and marketing people on the call, and wow, now it takes the sales process takes a little bit longer, but when that person finally gets to either our discovery or our code review, the alignment is so much better. We have not inadvertently overpromised anything. We've not inadvertently created a vision that we're seeing but that's 10 years down the road and is not, what we meant for 3 months down the road. And the client has a real good feel for what it is we can deliver and how. So I think that has changed up how we work with these these clients, and how that relationship can be put on a solid foundation for the long term. So, and I don't think a lot of agencies are doing that approach right away. I think some are gaining there, and I think we're headed that way. And that's why we went for content. That's why we're doing these podcasts now. That's why we want people to get to know us. 3/4 of the reason we just launched Shaping E-commerce on YouTube is because it's our team who has got 10 years, 15 years of experience just sharing their experience. And this is not highly polished stuff, but if you want to know who you're going to be working with, that's who it is. And if that seems like a fit, that's a positive. So
can you tell us that the YouTube channel again?
Yeah.
Shaping E-commerce with IronPlane. Shaping E-commerce. Okay. We've just soft launched, but there's we've got 6 months of content already in the can, so we're step by step.
Yeah, no, we'll make sure to link everything.
Thank
you.
We
will for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And I really appreciate that you guys kind of bring everybody in on the front end. Sorry to cut you off, because in my previous life before Noviland, I worked on both sides of that. I worked in the not in the tech side, but in the account management side, and then also moved over to the sales side. And I've been on both halves of why did you promise this? And then also somebody told me we could do this, so I promised it, so make it happen. I've worked on both sides. So I appreciate that you guys do that up front. And to try to make a segue into the actual title of today's episode, to get a little bit of content on that, because I feel an obligation to the audience. I used to actually work in criminal background screening, so we were processing people's PII all the time, or personal identifying information, social security numbers. We had everything on everybody, so there was a lot that industry had to do for security. What are some of the security measures that e-commerce business owners need to take into account when they're building their own site? Because I'm sure Amazon has some native stuff built in place, or Shopify, or nothing is perfect, but what are some of the things that they need to consider when building their own site?
Okay, and I think this is going to overlap with even your SaaS tools like your Shopify's, but just in general, I think security at the moment, we all know we need to focus on it and make sure it's a part of our yearly, quarterly, depends how big and complex you are, planning, and that we're reviewing this. It's a little bit like your smoke detectors in the house. Can you ever have too many? Me says no. My wife disagrees, because
the batteries all die.
Yeah, exactly. They do. And it's always at 2 a.m. It's like, and I'm just thinking, because last night I had a chirp at 2 a.m. and I couldn't figure out what it was. And so, but given, what we know right now with the tensions in the world, cyber threats and security threats are always rising right now. But we know that in particular, this is going to continue to go forward. And so she uses the moment to dot our I's and cross our T's. At its most basic level, repositories, okay? Where if you're doing any kind of custom coding, and this could be your front end theming on headless BigCommerce or Shopify, it doesn't matter. Whoever's doing that code, in theory, has a repository with different versions of your site. And you want to make sure that that code repository is accessible to you. You want to be able to get a backup of that. If your developer, for some reason, disappears, and it may not be cybersecurity, it could just be you got one lone freelancer and you can't reach them, or it could be an agency and their internet's been cut off. Who knows? You want to know where those repositories are. So like at IronPlane, we do in the cloud, we have our repositories and they're backed up every day, but we also have it backed up to two physical locations, one in our core development office in Poland and another here in Portland, Maine, just because. If it goes offline, we want the ability to restore your code. Now, the issue with code, it's not your orders. And I always want to emphasize for folks to realize that the code repository is just the code. It is not your database of orders and customers in your business. So this is your live site. Now, if you're running your own e-com site, like a Magento, you want to, it depends on where you're hosted. If you're hosted on-prem in your own cloud, AWS, which is where we host our client sites, or at Nexus or some of the others, you want to review today, what are the backup policies? Most hosting companies will have a daily backup and then usually 1 week or 2 weeks of snapshots. But is a daily backup enough? Again, it depends on how busy your company is. If you're running 1,000 orders an hour or 10 orders an hour, and it's been 23 hours since your last backup, that could be a substantial amount of data you've lost. So do you need to have hourly backups? Or is that data going into an internal ERP system, whether it's NetSuite or QuickBooks or whatever else, in which case you have or Shipware HQ and you've got the backup, right? So these are the things you want to review, because you don't want to find yourself all of a sudden down and you've lost a day's worth of your business. So in this case, we have some clients, we back up to separate AWS regions, because AWS regions have come down. I mean, it's not impenetrable. And it can be down for hours, right? So we can restore from a different region. We have other clients that want to back up onto a physical server, and we actually have some that are evaluating some where we are in Portland, so we can physically go get that server if we have to and plug it into the internet and bring them live. I mean, so you can start to think about things like that. And this is where, when I think about SaaS tools, I also get a little bit nervous. Okay. So yes, the SaaS tools like Shopify, BigCommerce are going to give you that ability to back up your orders. They have modules and third parties that'll back up your customers and your orders, all that good stuff. But what about your whole site? You can't, and yes, they have their infrastructures. They're fantastic. But even the best infrastructures get brought down. And so this is a little bit of, I would love to know that I have a backup of my entire site somewhere that is not just sitting on the cloud, or at least it's in multiple clouds, if you will. So those are the basics across the board. Now, other things, security-wise, that anybody should be doing: go in and review all your passwords. I know this, we hear this all the time, but user roles and admin, go into your Shopify, your WooCommerce, your Magento, your BigCommerce, whatever you're running right now, go in and see how many admin users you've been creating over the years and how many you've never turned off, because these are so easy to exploit. Setting those roles and permissions is never hard, and you want to get in the habit of doing it and limiting it. And then when somebody leaves, whether it's a vendor or an employee, you've got to have an off ramp, I guess would be the right way to say that. You want to have the ability to shut down access. And we're happy to even share our process with people. I mean, it's just, we've got our onboarding and our offboarding, how, somebody comes through, to make sure that even if they're not a bad actor, their credentials are out there. And, and it's just, things happen, and it doesn't take much to do it.
Yeah.
So those are the basics, I think, that everybody should be looking at. You want your repo, you want your backup of your live site. Minimally, if you don't have all your site, you want your customers and your orders backed up in a way that you can get access to them. And then you want to look at your internal security processes and just make sure you're locking down where and how you can. So.
Yeah, that's sort of the offboarding checklist. I think is something that's important. It's vital when especially what we've seen in the past, year or two with the Great Resignation and
yes,
and everyone's information. Yeah, it's still floating out there. It's something that is a very nice reminder, I think, to all business owners to definitely get on top of, if they don't already back up their site. And so you mentioned for example, Shopify might have third parties that back it up for you. Is that something that you would just plug in?
There are. So I was just looking the other day because we have more and more big commerce clients growing, and I was just looking. I can't remember the name. I just found that they had one that it looked like, we haven't tested it yet, but it looked like it actually backed up the whole site. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see if that does what it expects to do. But these are the things I would look at for any SaaS tool, because what if you're running a $20 million business on a SaaS tool and you can't get access to it tomorrow, or the servers have slowed down? That's very expensive. And unlike an on-prem solution, where you can replicate the data and replicate the site, multiple places, now you may lose a few hours, but you're going to be back up and running very quickly, and you control the keys. And so this gets in that whole, again, building on somebody else's land. So
Would you say that leaving credentials live for folks who are no longer with the organization is kind of the biggest hole that business owners have open for cybersecurity threats?
I think it's a common one. I think the other one that is harder to track down is business owners plugging in any module they see out there and not having the developers vet it, because some of these modules are pretty, have a lot of security vulnerabilities. And this is where, WooCommerce is such a, people love WordPress, and then they go to WooCommerce. It seems easy and fast, and then they can plug in all these things. Boy, keeping that thing secure is so hard, because it's so easy to do, and then you don't have developers or anybody looking at it from that, how hardened is it, and then all of a sudden you find out, you've got these problems. Not that you can't manage them, but it's easy not to manage them. It's easy to have those holes come through, and so so I think that's an issue. And I think this also dovetails. We haven't at all talked about this, but PCI compliance is a very real thing for companies as they grow, and it goes beyond PCI. It goes beyond just the idea of making sure your credit cards are safe. It's not just that. It's anything that can touch the cardholder environment, including these admin passwords. You're required to have a written policy and procedure and process in place and verifiable that you have all these protocols going on, because the worst case scenario is you get a hack, and then Visa and MasterCard say you can no longer take Visa and MasterCard. There's, and people don't think through that, but the reality is, once you cross into a few $1 million a year in sales, you're into these different levels of PCI compliance. You're required to do these things, and you can find yourself on the bad end of not only business issue, but of course the risk to all the data. So,
and does PCI stand for payment card industry?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Awesome. Had to Google it. There's so many acronyms that fly around, and
honestly, I'm going, I hope we should Google that, because I'm pretty sure that's what it stands for. I've been throwing around PCI. We're not there's so many agencies and companies out there that do. This is all they do is penetration testing and checking that. But as an agency, we have to be PCI compliant and be able to show the AOC, the attestation of compliance, to our clients as well, because we're part of their cardholder environment, because we have developers that can impact their servers, even though we never take their credit cards through our systems. That's part of their envelope. So it's more complex than what a lot of folks think, but it doesn't have to be hard to do. It's just, but you want to adopt those. It's a great time right now. Take a look at it, spend half a day, and then have somebody that just is responsible quarterly for kind of looking at these pieces, I think. So.
Gotcha. Well, Robert, thank you so much for sharing everything here. And I did go on ahead and grab the URL for your YouTube channel, Shaping eCommerce with IronPlane. We are now subscribers. So we'll link that in the description of this video. But do you want to give us a quick rundown of the kind of information that you're going to be sharing there? And then also just about IronPlane in general, and maybe what your ideal client looks like?
Sure. So, I think we've talked about IronPlane is an e-commerce website development agency. We take a long-term approach and a business approach to how we build websites with clients. If you are in the middle of trying to figure out how to improve your e-commerce website, and you're trying to decide on platforms or where to go or how to fix it, give us a call. If you liked anything you heard about today, I love continuing the conversation. You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. happy to connect with anybody, and of course on our YouTube channel as well. And the kind of stuff we're going to do there is honestly talking about the same things we just talked about today. We're just anything that we've got an expertise in house or a client has asked a question about will likely end up as a 10-minute video on our perspective on it. So day-to-day issues that people face in e-commerce systems.
Nice.
Perfect. And that website for anybody listening is IronPlane, IronPlane, very simple.com.
Not AIN, right? Plane, like the woodworking tool, the right tool for the job, and so that's as an old woodworker. So great. Well, guys, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to join you today.
Oh, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. Are we going to see you at Prosper? We didn't even ask.
No. We're going to do we're finally going back into the conference world for the first time in 2.5 years. So we're going to do a small one in relatively small L1 in LA called eTail Summit. And that's going to be our toe dipping back into the conference world.
Gotcha.
And then I think we'll be going back to some of the big ones again later this year.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah, very exciting. Well, maybe we'll meet you at one later in the year.
Hope so. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you guys liked what you heard today, be sure to give us a thumbs up, comment with your thoughts, share the show with your friends, and be sure to turn on those notifications. That way you never miss a conversation with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Robert with IronPlane. So thank you again so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks. Bye, guys.